I always knew my past would catch up to me. You don't just walk away from a life like mine without consequences. For 15 years, I was a ghost in the streets of Chicago, a man without rules, without limits, without a soul. I ran with the worst. I did things I don't dare to speak of. I laughed in the face of death, convinced that nothing waited for me on the other side. I was wrong. 3 years ago, I walked away from that life. I found God. Or maybe he found me. I left the gang, left the drugs, left the bloodshed. I cleaned myself up, started fresh. For the first time in my life, I thought I was safe. I was wrong about that too. The night it happened, I was walking home from work. Late shift. The streets were empty, the air thick with that Chicago winter cold. That's when I saw them. 2 men, in dark hoodies, standing near the alley. They weren't just any guys off the street. I recognized the way they moved, the way they scanned the area before locking eyes on me. I had seen that look before. I had worn that look before. Predators. Turned the corner, quickening my pace, but the moment I did, bang! The first gunshot tore through my side. I stumbled, my hands instinctively pressing against the warmth spreading through my coat. Bang! Bang! More shots. The pain came fast, deep, like fire burning through my ribs. I collapsed to my knees, my vision blurring. Footsteps approached. One of them crouched beside me. "You really thought you could just leave, huh?" The voice. I knew that voice. Charlie Monroe. We used to run together. Years ago I called him my brother. But I left, and he stayed, and now he was here to finish what I started. I tried to speak, but the blood filling my mouth made it impossible. "Boss sends his regards," Charlie whispered. Then darkness. I thought that was it. I thought death had finally come for me. But when I opened my eyes, I wasn't in Chicago anymore. I was falling, and below me, waiting in the endless pit of fire and shadows, someone was smiling. I was falling, not through air, through emptiness. The world above me, the cold Chicago streets, the city lights, the last sounds of my dying breath vanished. There was no sky, no ground, no sense of direction. Only an endless descent into darkness. I should have been terrified. Instead, I felt something worse. Recognition, like a part of me had always known this place was waiting for me. Then the heat came. At first, it was just a shift in the air. Warm, thick, suffocating. Then it grew into an unbearable skin-melting heat. The kind that didn't just burn flesh, it seared into the soul, and then I hit the ground. The impact should have shattered me, but instead it was soft, like sinking into burning sand. The heat licked at my skin, filling my lungs with the stench of sulfur, ash, and something else, something rotten. I pushed myself up, my hands sinking into the blackened earth. The ground pulsed beneath my fingers as if it were alive. Then I heard it. Footsteps, slow, deliberate, approaching from the shadows. I turned, and that's when I saw him. A man, or at least, he looked like one. Tall, dressed in a sharp black suit that didn't belong in a place like this. His face was smooth, ageless, his skin pale like marble, but his eyes burned like dying embers, filled with something ancient and cruel. He stopped a few feet away, hands in his pockets, tilting his head as he studied me. Then he smiled. Michael Carter. His voice was silk and razors, smooth yet sharp enough to cut. "It's been a long time," I froze. I had never met this man before, but somehow I knew him. His presence was too familiar. The way he stood, the way he spoke. I had felt him before, not here, in Chicago, in my old life. Every time I pulled the trigger, every time I spilled blood without a second thought, every time I gave in to the rage, the violence, the greed, he had been there, a shadow at the edge of my mind, a whisper in the dark. "Who are you?" My voice came out hoarse. The man's smile widened, revealing teeth just a little too sharp. "You already know. he said, and then the earth trembled. Screams rose in the distance, agonized, endless wails that sent chills through my bones. I turned my head and suddenly I saw it, the city of the damned, endless towers of black stone stretched into the blood-red sky, their surfaces writhing as if made of living flesh. The ground cracked open in places, revealing rivers of fire, where figures twisted and screamed beneath the flames, and hanging in the sky, suspended by chains made of darkness itself, were people. Not bodies. Souls. Thousands of them. I stumbled back, my breath ragged. "No, this isn't real. I changed. I left that life. You think that matters?" The man's voice cut through my panic like a blade. I turned back to him, and for the first time, his human disguise began to fade. His skin darkened, cracks forming across his face, revealing glimpses of something far older beneath. His eyes burned hotter, his shadow stretching unnaturally around us. "You don't just get to walk away, Michael," he said. "You spent 15 years doing my work, and now you think a little guilt, a little regret is enough to erase it." I clenched my fists. I changed. I gave my life to God. The man, the demon, chuckled. "Did you, though?" He stepped closer. "Or did you just get scared? Did you turn to him because you feared what was waiting for you in the dark?" I shook my head. "No. I wanted to be better." He raised a hand. Chains erupted from the ground. They wrapped around my arms, my legs, my throat. Burning hot, suffocating, I fell to my knees, the weight crushing me. "Your soul belongs here, Michael." His voice was no longer human. It was lowered, deep, endless. "And I've come to collect." I fought against the chains, but they tightened. The heat grew unbearable. The screams of the damned surrounded me, and the demon knelt beside me, whispering in my ear. "Did you really think he wanted someone like you?" For the first time since I got here, I felt doubt. What if he was right? I had done terrible things. I had taken lives, betrayed, stolen, destroyed. Maybe no amount of prayer could change that. Maybe I really did belong here. The demon smiled, sensing my hesitation. "That's it," he whispered. "You feel it, don't you, the truth?" He placed a hand on my shoulder, his fingers like burning iron. "Say it," he urged. "Admit it." I opened my mouth, and then everything changed. A sound cut. Through the darkness, a single voice, firm, unshaken. "He does not belong to you." The ground shook, the sky cracked open, flooding the abyss with blinding light. The demon hissed, recoiling as if burned, and as the light grew brighter, burning away the shadows, I saw him. Standing tall, robed in white, eyes filled with fire, and in that moment I knew Jesus had come for me. The light poured down from above, cutting through the suffocating darkness. It wasn't just brightness, it was power, the kind that burned away lies and left only the truth. Belial stumbled back, his human disguise fully melting away. His pale skin cracked like scorched earth, revealing a form darker than the void itself. His suit disintegrated, replaced by something older, covered in chains that rattled with every movement. His face twisted, stretched, revealing eyes like burning pits of coal, filled with pure, endless hatred. He let out a snarl, his voice no longer smooth and charming, but layered, guttural, ancient. "He belongs to me!" The voice from above boomed, again shaking the very foundation of this place. "He does not belong to you." And then I saw him, standing at the center of the light, tall, powerful, unshaken. Jesus, his robe was pure white, yet shined with a brilliance beyond color. His hands, scarred, marked with the wounds of the cross, radiated light. His eyes, they weren't just fire. They were truth, and the moment I saw him, I felt everything, the weight of my sins, the blood on my hands, the faces of the people I had hurt, stolen from, betrayed. I fell to my knees, unable to stand in his presence. "Lord," the words barely left my lips. Jesus turned his gaze to me, his expression not of anger, but of sorrow. "Why do you kneel before the enemy?" The words struck something deep inside me. Why was I kneeling? I looked down. The chains were still wrapped around me, burning, suffocating. Belial laughed, regaining his composure. He stepped forward, chains rattling. "You see, Michael?" His voice dripped with venom. "You can feel it, can't you? The weight of what you've done." I closed my eyes, and I saw it all. The faces of those I had robbed, the fear in the eyes of the people I had beaten, the lifeless bodies of the men I had killed. The blood was on my hands. "You think one prayer erased all of that?" Belial hissed. "You think he wants you? Look at yourself. You're nothing but a murderer." The moment the words hit me, the chains tightened, and that's when I realized I was the one keeping them there. The guilt, the shame. I was holding on to it. I turned back to Jesus, tears burning down my face. "I don't deserve your mercy," I whispered. Jesus took a step forward, his fire consuming the darkness. "Do you think I came for those who deserve it?" His voice wasn't condemning. It was full of love. "I came for the broken, for the lost, for those drowning in the weight of their sins. I came for you, Michael." The moment he spoke my name, the chains around me cracked. Belial let out a furious scream. "No." He raised his arms. The chains that bound me surged upward, tightening, trying to pull me back. "He is mine." Jesus turned his gaze toward him, and in a voice that shook the very foundations of hell, he spoke. "It is finished." A shockwave of pure light exploded outward. The chains shattered. The ground beneath me crumbled into nothing. Belial screamed, his form melting away, consumed by the very abyss he ruled. And then I was falling again. But this time, I wasn't falling into darkness. I was falling into light. I gasped. Air rushed into my lungs like fire. I wasn't in hell anymore. I was back. Fluorescent lights flickered above me. The distant beeping of a heart monitor filled my ears. I turned my head, my body aching. I was in a hospital bed. Alive, I looked down at my hands, expecting to see the burns from the chains, but they weren't there. I was free. The door to my room creaked open. A nurse stepped in, her eyes going wide. "My God, you're awake!" She rushed out, calling for the doctor. I barely heard her. I was still staring at my hands. I should have been relieved. I should have been grateful just to be alive. But all I could think about was what I had seen, what I had been saved from, and what Jesus had said to me before I left that place. "You have work to do." I clenched my fists. I knew what that meant. I wasn't just brought back, I was sent back because people needed to know. People like me, people drowning in guilt, in sin, in the lies of the enemy, needed to hear the truth. Hell is real, but so is salvation, and as long as you still breathe, it's not too late. The moment Jesus spoke, hell trembled. "It is finished." His voice wasn't just sound, it was authority, power, finality. The very air cracked with divine force, and for the first time, Belial looked afraid. The shadows around him twisted and recoiled, like creatures retreating from a fire. The chains he had wrapped around me snapped apart, their broken links evaporating into smoke. I gasped, my body suddenly weightless, the crushing weight of guilt, shame, and regret lifting from my soul. And then Belial screamed. Not like a man, like something ancient, something never meant to lose. His form twisted violently, his blackened wings unfurling in a desperate attempt to hold his ground. His once smooth face contorted, revealing something grotesque and monstrous beneath. "No," he bellowed, his voice splitting into 1,000 echoes. "This one is mine." Jesus took a step forward. Belial staggered back. "He was yours," Jesus said, his voice calm, unshaken. "But he chose me." The light surrounding Christ grew brighter, hotter, more intense. I had never seen anything like it, a radiance so pure that it burned away everything false, everything wicked. Belial thrashed, his wings disintegrating, his form melting away under the weight of the divine presence. "No, you can't take him," he roared. "You have no claim here." Jesus lifted his hand, and suddenly chains wrapped around Belial, the very same chains he had used to bind me. His own weapons turned against him. "You deceived him," Jesus continued. "You tormented him. You whispered in his ear and led him into darkness." The chains tightened, pulling Belial downward, but he is free now. Belial screeched, his claws scraping at the burning ground, trying to hold on. "No, he's a murderer, a sinner. He belongs with me." Jesus looked at me, and in that gaze I felt the weight of everything I had done. But instead of judgment, I saw love. "You are forgiven, Michael," Jesus said. Tears burned down my face. I had spent so many years believing I was beyond redemption, that no amount of change could erase what I had done, that I would never be worthy of mercy. But that was the lie. The truth was standing before me, and I could feel it down to the very marrow of my soul. I was saved. Belial roared in agony, "No! He belongs to me!" Jesus turned back to him. "He was never yours." The ground beneath Belial split open, revealing a chasm of endless, swirling fire. The damned screamed from below, their voices twisting into one long, endless wail. The chains around him tightened one last time. Then they pulled. Belial's form was yanked downward, his claws raking through the air, his face twisted in pure rage and terror. "I will come back for you, Michael." His final words echoed through the abyss, and then he was gone, swallowed by the darkness he once controlled. The moment he disappeared, the entire realm shook violently. The sky split apart, the rivers of fire dried up. The very walls of hell began to collapse, and then Jesus turned to me. "It's time to go home." The fall began again, but this time I wasn't falling into darkness. I was ascending into light. It wasn't just brightness, it was warmth, peace, the feeling of being carried. The cries of the damned faded, the fire no longer burned me, and then I opened my eyes. I gasped. A rush of cold air filled my lungs, sharp and painful. The world snapped back into focus. I was no longer in hell. I was in a hospital bed. A heart monitor beeped steadily beside me. The white ceiling above was painfully normal. I was alive. I had been brought back. For a long moment, I just stared at the ceiling, my heart pounding in my chest. And then I remembered everything, the fall, the flames, Belial waiting for me, and then Jesus, he had come for me. Tears filled my eyes. I turned my head slowly. A nurse stood frozen near the doorway, her face pale, her eyes wide with disbelief. "My God," she whispered, You were dead. Dead." She wasn't lying. I could still feel it, the place I had been, but I was back, and I knew why. I hadn't just been saved, I had been sent back for a reason. "You have work to do," Jesus had told me, and I knew exactly what that meant. People needed to know, the world needed to hear the truth. Hell is real, demons are real, but so is Jesus. I pushed myself up, ignoring the dull pain in my chest. "I need a phone," I croaked, my throat dry. The nurse blinked. What?" "A phone," I repeated, urgency burning inside me because I needed to call someone. I needed to warn them because there were others out there, just like me. Others who believed they were too far gone, that there was no hope, that the voices in the dark were telling them the truth. But I had seen the truth with my own eyes, and now I had one mission: to tell them before it was too late, to make them understand no one is too far gone, no one is beyond redemption. Jesus can save you if you let him. And I was going to spend the rest of my life making sure the world knew it. I should have died that night. By all logic, by all reason, I should have never opened my eyes again. But I did, because Jesus pulled me out of the fire. And now I had only one choice: to tell the world what I saw. The hospital room was silent, except for the steady beep of the heart monitor beside me. I had been awake for less than an hour, but already everything felt different. The air, the light, even the weight of my own body, like I had been born again. The door creaked open, and a doctor stepped inside. He was an older man, grey hair, kind eyes, but his face was unreadable as he flipped through my chart. "You were in a bad way, Mr. Carter," he said, shaking his head. "2 gunshot wounds. One just missed your heart by an inch. You flatlined for 3 minutes. 3 minutes, I almost laughed. 3 minutes in the real world, a lifetime in hell." "You must be a lucky man," the doctor continued. "People don't just come back from that." "I wasn't lucky. I was rescued." "I need a phone," I said, my voice hoarse. The doctor frowned. "Right now you need to rest." I grabbed his wrist, my grip weak but desperate. "Please." Something in my eyes must have convinced him. He sighed, pulling a phone from his coat pocket and handing it to me. "Make it quick," he said. I didn't hesitate. My hands were shaking as I dialed the only number that mattered. The line rang twice before a familiar voice answered. "Hello?" I swallowed hard. "Pastor Greg," I whispered. A pause. Then, "Michael?" "Yeah, it's me." "Jesus Christ, son, We thought you were dead." I closed my eyes. "I was." Silence, a long, heavy silence. Then his voice returned, softer this time. "What happened?" I took a deep breath. "I saw it, Pastor." "Saw what?" I gripped the phone tighter. "Hell." Another pause, a longer one. "Where are you?" Pastor Greg finally asked. "St. Luke's Hospital." "I'm coming." The line went dead. Pastor Greg arrived 20 minutes later. I had barely sat up in bed when he walked in, his face pale, his hands trembling. "You saw it?" he said. It wasn't a question. I nodded. He pulled up a chair, his eyes searching mine. "Tell me everything." So I did. I told him about the fall, the heat, the city of the damned. I told him about Belial, about the chains, about how I almost believed the lies. And then I told him about Jesus, about the moment he appeared, the moment hell itself trembled at his name. When I finished, Pastor Greg leaned back, exhaling shakily. "My God," he whispered. I looked at him, my chest tightening. "People don't know, Pastor," I said. "They think hell is a joke, a fairy tale. They don't understand how real it is." He nodded slowly. "That's why you came back," he murmured. I swallowed. "Yeah, I didn't just come back. I was sent back. Jesus had given me a mission, and I wasn't going to waste it." 2 weeks later, I stood in front of my old gang. They had gathered in an abandoned warehouse on the south side of Chicago, expecting a reunion, expecting me to come back. I looked at each of them. Men I had called brothers, men who had done unspeakable things by my side. I had bled for them, killed for them, and now I was here to save them. "I died," I said, my voice steady. "I was shot in the streets, left for dead. And for 3 minutes, I was gone." They watched me in silence, some skeptical, some amused. "You all think you're untouchable," I continued. "I did too. We thought we could do whatever we wanted, take whatever we wanted, live how we wanted, because when we die, it just ends, right?" I let the silence hang. But that's not true. I looked each of them in the eyes, because I saw what's waiting. There. Expressions changed. I took a step closer. "I went to hell," I said, "and I was supposed to stay there." One of the guys, Trey, scoffed. "Come on, man. You expect us to believe—" I cut him off. "You think I'd be standing here if it wasn't real?" I saw the doubt flicker across his face. "You think I'd come back to warn you if I didn't see it?" With my own eyes, the room was silent. Good, they were listening. I took a deep breath. I should be dead. I should still be down there, screaming with the rest of them. But Jesus pulled me out. I let that sink in. And he sent me back for you. More silence. I met their eyes, one by one. "You still have a chance," I said. "But you have to choose it before it's too late." I turned to leave, my chest pounding. I had planted the seed. The rest was up to them. As I walked toward the exit, a voice called out, "Michael!" I turned. It was Trey. "Tell me more," he said. And in that moment I knew this was only the beginning.